So imagine your phone buzzing. You look down, and it's a text message from a friend answering a highly specific question that you were just planning to ask them.
You haven't typed it yet.
Right. You haven't even picked up your phone. I mean, it completely shatters everything we know about cause and effect. It feels impossible.
Yeah.
But according to 3 decades of highly unorthodox, basically declassified style Russian astrophysics, experiencing something before it actually happens isn't magic.
No, not according to this research.
Yeah, they argue it might just be a biological function of the human brain interacting with the actual fabric of time.
It is it's a massive claim.
Right.
And it really sits at the absolute outer edge of what we consider theoretically possible. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a body of research spanning over 30 years, mostly synthesized in a 2021 paper by Alexander Trofimov.
Right.
And it details the work of a Russian facility called Aineurismtv. That's the International Scientific Research Institute of Cosmoplanetary Anthropology.
Which, I mean, that sounds like a facility straight out of a Cold War sci-fi novel.
It really does. But their central thesis is that time isn't just a clock ticking in the background of the universe. They argue that time is actually a physical substance. And under the right environmental conditions, human consciousness can literally tap into it.
Tap into time itself.
Exactly. Receive information from the future and basically transcend the physical limits of the solar system.
Okay, we are definitely going to unpack the mechanics of how they claim to do this because, well, they built some truly bizarre physical equipment to test these theories. But to understand how human beings might bend time, the research insists we first have to look up.
We have to understand the physical environment of Earth right now.
Yes, because their entire premise starts with the claim that our planet's magnetic shield is currently dropping.
Right. They refer to our current era as a state of geomagnetic deprivation. So, you know, the Earth is surrounded by a magnetosphere.
Yeah.
You can think of it as a heavy electromagnetic blanket. And its job is to deflect the brutal solar winds and high-energy cosmic rays that are constantly bombarding us from deep space. But they argue that blanket is losing its conduction. It's weakening.
So, like a planetary sunscreen that's washing off, what actually makes it to the surface when that shield drops?
Well, a significantly higher flux of cosmic rays. Specifically, we're talking about high-energy protons and electrons. And I mean, these aren't just abstract physics concepts. This is ionizing radiation.
Right, the stuff that damages cells.
Exactly. When these particles bypass the weakened magnetosphere and hit the surface, they penetrate biological tissue.
Which means they penetrate our DNA.
Yes. Ionizing radiation has enough energy to literally knock electrons out of atoms. That can break the chemical bonds in our DNA. And usually, sure, this causes cellular damage, but occasionally the DNA repairs itself differently, which results in a mutation.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting, because the Aineurismtv researchers point to the historical record to show that periods of severe geomagnetic deprivation correlate directly with sudden, massive leaps and crashes in human evolution.
It's a fascinating timeline they provide.
Yeah, they point specifically to the Lachamp and Mono Lake excursions. These were major geomagnetic drops that happened roughly 30 to 40,000 years ago. And when you look at the anthropological record for that exact window...
That is exactly when the Neanderthals disappeared.
Right. And it's not just extinctions either.
No, it's sudden, highly complex biological upgrades. Because around that same 40,000-year mark during the weakened magnetic shield, we see the emergence of the FOXP2 gene mutation in our own ancestors.
And just to clarify for everyone, that's the gene associated with the physical and cognitive development of human speech, right?
Yes, it's heavily linked to language processing and articulation. And if you go back even further in the paleomagnetic record, around 2.4 million years ago, there was another massive drop in the Earth's shield.
And that coincides with another leap.
Precisely. That period aligns perfectly with a specific genetic mutation that triggered a sudden, dramatic increase in brain volume within the Homo lineage.
Wow. So the implication here is that evolutionary progress isn't always just a slow, gradual crawl over millions of years.
That's right. Sometimes it's a spike.
Yeah, sometimes the planetary shield drops, the biosphere gets bathed in cosmic rays, and the resulting genetic mutations force a rapid evolutionary leap. So if that's the mechanism they're proposing, and they also claim our shield is currently dropping, I mean, are they saying we are actively sitting in one of these cosmic mutation windows right now?
Yes. That is the foundational premise of their work. They believe that because we are currently experiencing geomagnetic deprivation, the human brain and our genetic structure as a whole is uniquely vulnerable or perhaps receptive is a better word, to new types of cosmic interactions.
Okay.
And that physical vulnerability is actually why Isuka began conducting their experiments in the first place.
All right, so that establishes the biological state of the human body for this deep dive. But let's get into the theoretical physics they're applying to this vulnerable brain. Because this all hinges on the work of a prominent Russian astrophysicist named Nikolai Kozyrev.
Yeah, Nikolai Kozyrev is absolutely central to everything Isuka does. So he was an astrophysicist who was looking at stars, specifically trying to calculate their energy output.
Right.
And he concluded that, based purely on nuclear fusion, stars really shouldn't be able to burn as hot and as long as they do. He hypothesized there had to be another energy source feeding them.
And his conclusion was, wait for it, time.
Yes, time. Kozyrev theorized that stars and planets act as massive cosmic transformers. They take what he called strings of energy time, and they transform them into the physical particles that make up the universe. To him, time was not just a dimension. It was an active, physical force with direction and density.
Okay, wait, hold on. I need you to back up here. Time is a physical force.
I know, it's a lot.
I mean, time is a measurement of change.
Right.
It's a concept, like inches or pounds or degrees. How can a measurement have physical density or be a string of energy?
Well, it requires a total paradigm shift. Think of a river.
Okay.
We measure the speed of the river in miles per hour, but the river itself is made of water, a physical substance that has weight, that carries energy, that can carve a canyon over millions of years.
Oh, I see.
Kozyrev believed time is the water. We just happen to measure it with clocks. He argued that this flow of time energy interacts with all physical matter. He even viewed it as the primary biological nutrient for human cells, the ultimate source of life.
Time as a cellular nutrient.
Yeah.
That is wild. And building off of Kozyrev's idea, the researchers bring in a concept from academician VP Kaznacheev called the theory of the two spaces.
Right. So Kaznacheev hypothesized that a living substance, particularly a highly evolved biological structure like the human brain, actually exists simultaneously in two overlapping reality structures. The first is what he calls the Minkowski-Einstein space.
Let's define that for a second. That is the traditional physical world we all experience every day.
Exactly.
The world governed by Einstein's theory of relativity, where the absolute, unbreakable speed limit is the speed of light.
Yes. In Minkowski-Einstein space, causality is absolute. A leads to B. The past happens, then the present, then the future. And entropy, the gradual decline into disorder, is the law of the land. But Kaznacheev argued there's a second overlapping space, which he called Kozyrev space.
And the physics of Kozyrev space are totally inverted.
They are. In Kozyrev space, this physical time energy flows with what they call a negentropic vector.
Negentropic.
Right. Negentropy is the opposite of entropy. It's an organizing force that moves things from chaos into order. And closely, in this space, velocities are not limited by the speed of light. They can actually approach infinity.
Okay, let me try to visualize how infinite velocity changes things.
Yeah.
Think of traditional time, like reading a book page by page.
Sure.
You're bound by the speed of reading, so you only experience the exact page you're currently looking at. But Kozyrev space is like stepping back and looking at the entire spine of the book.
I like that.
Because your velocity is infinite, you can access the beginning, middle, and end instantly. The entire story exists all at once. You're just interacting with it from a higher dimension where the barrier of linear sequence doesn't exist.
That is an excellent analogy. If you can move information at infinite velocity, it takes 0 seconds to reach its destination. Therefore, the past, the present, and the future all exist concurrently in the exact same moment.
Okay, I can follow the theoretical physics logic there, but I mean, theoretical physics is mostly math on chalkboards. You can't just step out of the universe to look at the book spine.
Right.
So how did Isuka actually test this? How do you build a piece of laboratory equipment to measure a space where time essentially doesn't exist?
Well, you build a device designed to capture and concentrate those hypothetical negentropic flows of time. And in 1989, the researchers constructed what are known as the Kozyrev Mirrors.
Oh man, I'm looking at the photos of these in the source material, and they look like giant curved metallic isolation chambers.
They really do.
They literally look like modern art sculptures made out of sheet metal.
But the physical structure is very specific. They are large, concave metallic screens, typically made from an aluminum alloy, and the curvature is the key.
Like a satellite dish.
Exactly like that.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that a parabolic satellite dish is curved to catch scattered radio waves and focus them into a single concentrated point on the receiver, the Kozyrev mirrors are curved to focus these waves of energy time.
So they put a human operator in a chair at the center of the mirror, right at that focal point.
Exactly. The human brain, in its vulnerable geomagnetic state, sits in the focal point of concentrated time energy. And the researchers didn't just put these mirrors in a laboratory in Moscow either.
Oh, right. Location was a huge factor.
Yes, location is a critical variable in this research. Kozyrev hypothesized that the direction and density of energy-time flows vary depending on where you are on the planet's latitude.
Because the Earth is a rotating sphere, so the physics of how it moves through space are different at the equator versus the poles.
Precisely. They believed the energy flows are strongest at the poles. So they transported these mirrors to the far north, placing them way up above the 73rd parallel in locations like Dixon.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a severe, freezing region where Kozyrev theorized time actually moves in reverse relative to the equator.
Which sets the stage for a series of experiments between 1990 and 1993 that genuinely stretched the limits of comprehension. They organized massive, global synchronous experiments. We're talking about over 5,000 participants worldwide.
Huge scale.
And the objective was to test transpersonal communication, pure mind-to-mind transfer of information, using the mirrors to access that infinite velocity Kozyrev space.
And the methodology they established was rigorous, too, to avoid confirmation bias. They created a master set, a constructor, of 77 distinct cultural symbols.
Okay.
During a designated window, a random number-generating computer program would select between 3 and 5 of these symbols.
So the human operator, sitting inside the aluminum mirror up in the freezing Arctic, would be given those randomly selected symbols. They had 5 minutes to focus their consciousness and transmit them outward into the Earth's information field.
Right.
Meanwhile, thousands of people around the globe sat down at that exact time and sketched whatever images popped into their minds.
And the data from the reception of those symbols is what makes this research so provocative. Because when they analyzed all the sketches from the global participants, the successful hits fell into 3 very distinct categories.
Okay, let's break this down.
So about 1/3 of the participants accurately received the transmitted symbols at the exact moment the operator was broadcasting them.
Which, honestly, if verified, is already a massive breakthrough.
Totally.
It implies instantaneous non-local communication, bypassing any known physical medium. Telepathy, basically.
Right. Now, the second third of the data showed delayed reception. Those participants sketched the correct symbols, but 3 to 6 hours after the transmission occurred.
Okay, a delay makes sense. But the final third of the data is where the whole concept of cause and effect just breaks down entirely.
Yeah, the final group of participants accurately sketched the symbols hours before the operator transmitted them. In fact, they recorded the correct symbols before the random number generator had even selected them.
Let's just pause on that for a second because the implications are staggering.
Yeah.
They drew the exact symbols before the computer chose them.
Yeah.
That is the text message analogy we started with today. The participants pulled information from an event that had not occurred yet in their linear timeline.
But in the framework of Kozyrev space, that is exactly how it's supposed to work. Because the mirror concentrates a space of infinite velocity, the future event, the computer selecting the symbol, was already accessible in the present.
Oh, because they're looking at the big spine?
Exactly. The participant's consciousness, acting as a highly sensitive receiver, just downloaded the data from the book spine. The researchers even noted that when they ran control groups where the transmitter was not sitting in the mirror, this pre-reception effect completely disappeared.
Okay, so if they genuinely believed they had proven the ability to perceive information backward through time on Earth, did they try looking outward? Like, did they try aiming this at the cosmos?
They did. Emboldened by the terrestrial data, Aineurismtv decided to test whether this effect held true across massive astronomical distances.
Right.
So in July of 1994, there was a major astronomical event. The Shoemaker-Levy comet collided with the planet Jupiter. It was a violent, highly observable cosmic impact.
So they set up an experiment between the mirrors up in Dixon and operators down in Novosibirsk to perceive the collision.
And what they logged was a massive spike in accurately perceived energetic signatures of the impact a full 72 hours before the light from the collision reached the telescopes on Earth.
3 days early. Because again, if velocity in Kozyrev space is infinite, the physical distance between Earth and Jupiter doesn't matter. The barrier of distance and the barrier of time are literally the same thing.
Precisely. If you bypass the speed of light, you bypass the delay it takes for the image of Jupiter to reach our eyes. You are experiencing the energetic reality of the event simultaneously.
Wow.
And they pushed this further in 2010 with a project involving what they called virtual astronauts. They placed researchers, specifically T. Kuznetsova and A. Mysak, inside the mirrors and tasked them with remote viewing the moon.
And the sketches these operators produced weren't just, vague shapes of craters. They drew highly specific anomalies. They sketched what appeared to be a complex geometric labyrinth of tubing and a mine structure hidden underneath a lunar crater.
Right. And the paper notes that years later, these highly specific structural drawings were actually corroborated by anomalies shown in a BBC documentary film called Moonrising.
Which is wild.
Yeah, and they also applied this precognitive mapping to terrestrial travel.
Oh, you mean the Italy trips?
Yes. In 2016 and 2017, expeditions were sent to Udine, Venice, and Sardinia. But before leaving, operators in the mirrors were tasked with perceiving the locations.
Okay.
They accurately sketched highly specific local artifacts and architectural details up to 3 days before the team physically traveled there to see them in person.
If we accept the premise that this facility has developed a reliable method to perceive the future, it immediately begs a major question for me.
Which is?
Why map the moon? Why draw statues in Italy? If you can access the future, why not use it for something vital, like saving human lives?
And that is exactly where Aistruka shifted their focus. Between 2017 and 2020, they dedicated their research to a deeply humanitarian application seismic forecast.
Predicting earthquakes.
Yeah. They wanted to see if human operators in the mirrors could detect the energetic buildup of massive earthquakes before they ruptured.
The paper specifically details their work targeting the San Andreas fault line. But to do this, they used a technique they call the quantum superposition of human consciousness. They actually instructed the operators to energetically project their observation, point out to the moon, and look back down at the Earth to monitor the seismic zones.
I know it sounds incredibly esoteric, but to ensure this wasn't just blind guesswork, the researchers rigorously tracked the physiological biometrics of the operators during these forecasting sessions.
Yeah, they needed hard data.
Exactly. They needed to know what the biological body is doing while it is supposedly touching the future.
And this is where the Kirlian photography comes in. For context for you listening, Kirlian photography is a technique used to capture coronal discharges. It basically photographs the electromagnetic field or the electrical aura surrounding an object.
Right. And when they photographed the operators in the middle of a seismic forecast, the Kirlian imagery revealed intense energetic spikes localized in very specific brain centers.
Wow.
The epiphysis, which is the pineal gland, and the hypothalamus lit up dramatically. But as soon as the operator stepped out of the mirror and the forecasting session ended, those localized energetic spikes vanish.
But they didn't just track the brain, right?
Yeah.
They monitored the cardiovascular system too. And this leads to one of the most compelling pieces of data in the entire paper, the global resonator effect.
Yes. So they used a diagnostic device called a Veda pulse to track heart rate variability. During one experiment, they had an operator sitting inside the Kozyrev Mirror in Novosibirsk.
Okay.
And they positioned a second operator thousands of miles away on Mount Raytan in Serbia, which is known for its unique electromagnetic properties.
When they analyzed the Veda pulse data from both operators during the forecast, their heart rate frequencies had perfectly synchronized across the continent.
Which is incredible on its own.
Right. But more importantly, both of their heart rates had locked into the Earth's Schumann resonance.
Yeah, the Schumann resonance is the fundamental electromagnetic frequency of the Earth's cavity. It's often referred to as the planetary heartbeat.
So cool.
The data implies that during these moments of future perception, the human cardiovascular system physically resonates with the macro environment of the planet itself.
Okay, I am with the Kirlian photography and the heart rate biometrics. I can totally see the scientific rigor in tracking physiological changes. But the paper details another tool they use to facilitate this process, and I have to admit, it stops me in my tracks every time I read it.
You're talking about the water.
Yes, they rely on something called holographically informed drinking water.
I know exactly how it sounds. It is a massive leap for a conventional scientific mind. But let's look strictly at the methodology they propose. They use a patented technology called an aurora hologram.
Right. The claim is that they encode specific informational frequencies onto this hologram and then transfer that information into regular drinking water. And supposedly, When an operator drinks this water, it physically tunes their body to receive information from the future. I mean, it sounds like absolute sci-fi snake oil. How does a scientist justify water holding a future frequency?
Well, it's the natural point of skepticism. But the Aineurismtv researchers don't just ask you to take their word for it. They present extensive spectral analysis.
Oh,
Yeah. They ran baseline scans of the resonant frequencies of various human organs before the operator consumed the water. Then, they ran the scans again after consumption.
so they're measuring the actual physical vibration of the liver, the kidneys, the heart.
Exactly. And the spectral graphs show genuine, measurable shifts in the frequency levels across those organ systems.
Yeah.
The water, according to their data, acts as a biological tuning fork. It physically adjusts the resonance of the human cells to better align with the negentropic flows of Kozyrev space.
They call this the super advancement effect.
Yes, and their data asserts that when operators drank this holographically informed water before entering the Kozyrev Mirrors, their accuracy in seismic forecasting spiked.
That's crazy.
They were consistently logging the dates, locations, and magnitudes of earthquakes days before any physical tremors registered on traditional geological seismographs.
Let's just step back and look at the massive scope of what we've unpacked today. We started with the physical reality of our planet's dropping magnetic shield, allowing cosmic rays to bombard our DNA, potentially sparking an evolutionary leap.
Right.
Then we explored the concept of time, not as a ticking clock, but as a dense physical river of energy that actually feeds our cells.
We examined the Kozyrev Mirrors' giant aluminum parabolas built in the freezing Arctic just to catch that river of time.
Yeah.
We looked at thousands of people drawing symbols before computers selected them, virtual astronauts mapping the moon, and human heartbeats synchronizing with the Earth to feel the tremors of earthquakes that hadn't even happened yet.
It is a phenomenal, mind-bending journey. And, whether you view this research as a blueprint for a future Nobel Prize in quantum biology or just as a deeply fascinating edge case of speculative fringe science,
Yeah.
it is incredibly valuable because it forces us to reconsider the absolute hard limits of the human mind.
True scientific inquiry demands that we test our assumptions. If nothing else, Alexander Trofimov and 30 years of Aineurismtv data insist that human beings are not just isolated, passive observers in this universe.
No.
We are highly sensitive, deeply entangled participants within its mechanics.
Which perfectly tees up the second tiny piece of source material we have today. It's an incredibly brief, very enigmatic update regarding something called the Pakal-Votan project.
Oh, yes?
We don't have the methodology. All the document says is, experiment has already been held, results forthcoming.
It is the ultimate cliffhanger for a research institute that literally studies the future. I mean, it leaves you wondering exactly where or when they pointed the mirrors this time.
It absolutely does. I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over today. We all take comfort in the steady forward ticking of the clock. We believe we're writing our lives 1 second at a time.
Right.
But if Kozyrev's physics are right, if the future is already sitting right here in the present, flowing through ourselves like cosmic rays, do we actually make decisions in our lives? Or are we all just remembering things that haven't happened yet?